Hi, I'm happy to be with you in the Church of Poetry, the Poetry Foundation. The title of my talk is Articulate Deformity, Poet as Wounded Citizen. I actually told my mother-in-law, what are you talking about? I said, the poet as wounded citizen. And she said, oh, you aren't wounded, she said. One of the most unassuming and yet heroic capacities of the poem is to take a very particular moment and enlarge it, to hold it up as a landscape whose implications are extensive and articulate, to offer the experience of what is particular as a soil sample of the human condition. Here, for example, is a passage from a poem by the great Polish poet Czesław Miłosz. If I had to tell what the world is for me, I would take a hamster, or a hedgehog, or a mole, and place him in a theater seat one evening, and bringing my ear close to his humid snout, would listen to what he says about the spotlights, the sound of the music, and the movements of the dance. If an explanation is supposed to be a useful thing, then Miłosz's poem is not exactly an explanation of the world. Rather, it could better be read as a customer complaint. Who is the complaint addressed to? Fellow sufferers, God, meaning? Perhaps a complaint to existence itself. It sounds wry and detached and whimsical, like a wise old Polish guy with huge eyebrows. But it has a bitterness that suggests to me that the speaker is pissed off. Maybe every talk about poetry is a defense of poetry. In any case, this one is. My thesis, expressed by the title, Articulate Deformity, is that the poet is and should be the designated complainer of the tribe, the one with a grudge, a chip on her shoulder, a tumor in his gut. He's the one who is going to talk about the way the birds shit on the hood of his car, about the quality of food served in the restaurant, and he's going to say things about the enormous damage done by human beings to each other, inevitably, in particular, have you noticed, in particular, perhaps, by the ones with penises. To confuse one's own pain with that of the age is one of the weird, maybe even heroic obligations of the poet, one of its grandiosities. My stomach is upset today. Something bad is happening in Afghanistan. Or maybe the poet will write a poem in the voice of the United States in which that country says, I can't get my manifest destiny to stand up like it used to. I think I must have ED, Empire Dysfunction Syndrome. Here is Allen Ginsberg inflating and projecting his own paranoia. Asia is rising against me. I haven't got a Chinaman's chance. I'd better consider my national resources. My national resources consist of 2 joints of marijuana, millions of genitals, an unpublishable private literature that jet planes 1,400 miles an hour, and 25,000 mental institutions. America, why are your libraries full of tears? I'm sick of your insane demands. Guess what? The gist is this. The world at large needs personalizing, and the personal life needs politicizing. This is one of poetry's jobs. William Carlos Williams, America's poetry all-around handyman, knew the value of extreme emphasis. To name things he understood is to make them visible, and thus to offer a kind of corrective vision. In his role as poetry's social realist, he brought into the aesthetic light such pedestrian materials as the shine of broken glass in alleyways and laborers measuring planks. And because what most requires seeing and saying keeps changing, what most requires seeing and saying keeps changing, the poet's job is never done. If William Carlos Williams were alive today, I think he might have written his most famous poem like this. So much depends upon a red multi-corporation, glazed with tax credits beside the white politicians. What is right in front of us is not visible until it is named with intensity. The metaphor that's been used in the past, the the one you might be familiar with, is that the artist is the canary in the mine shaft, a living, breathing, organic Geiger counter or fire alarm. When the canary stops singing and is found in a little yellow heap of feathers at the bottom of its cage, the miners know that it is time to get out of the mine or improve the air quality. The canary is a sensitive creature, but the poet is more than sensitive, and thus that image seems now a little sentimental to me. Personally, I'd like to say that the poet is an angry person in the emergency room trying to jump the line past the people from Connecticut whose child has a runny nose. In her amazing book, The End of the Novel of Love, the essayist Vivian Gornick uses the analogy not of canaries but of fingertips and nerve endings. Speaking of D.H. Lawrence and his open declaration of murderous feeling in the novel Sons and Lovers, she says that it is not that the artist sees what no one else can, but that she or he sees what everyone else sees, but does not say out loud. This is what Gornick says of Lawrence's novel. To see it laid down on the page, she's talking about the date of publication, to see it laid down upon the page was amazing. 10 minutes after the book had been published, everyone who could read said, "Of course, how could it be otherwise?" Two things had happened at once. A writer able to speak had appeared in a world ready to hear. And as timing is everything, that which had been felt was now understood. In great novels, says Gornick, we always feel that the writer at the time of the writing is struggling to make sense of what is perceived somewhere in the nerve endings, if not yet in clarified consciousness. D.H. Lawrence could feel the dividedness in his mouth. What I would add to Gornick's description is not just fingertips, but they're scorched, burned fingertips. They're burned fingers. It's not that artists are special, or that they are especially objective or even accurate in their exaggeratedness. As Gornick suggests, poets are wounded in the same way as everyone else, but with one particular distinction. They are not wounded into speechlessness. Instead, they are wounded into speech. Their job, unlike the roles assigned to the rest of us, is not to conceal their woundedness. And if what they say sometimes seems obvious, it was not always so. Here's a little sample of a poem by Muriel Rukeyser written in the early 70s. I lived in the first century of world wars. Most mornings, I would be more or less insane. The newspapers would arrive with their careless stories. The news would pour out of various devices, interrupted by attempts to sell products to the unseen. I would call my friends on other devices. They would be more or less mad for similar reasons. Now that poem, or at least one part of that poem, was rewritten 30 or 40 years later by the poet Dean Young. He says, I hate the radio, the way it pretends to be your friend. The poet is a citizen, a wounded citizen, but what the poet has to say is not commercially useful in an obvious way. The poem is not notable for its diplomacy, or its accuracy, or its rationality. It is useful, but that use is not predictable. It might be only existentially useful. That part of life which has been so radically downgraded in our time, in a culture like ours, which is dedicated to killing consciousness, whose survival depends on killing consciousness, which uses beauty and pleasure as its anesthetic. And I was reminded by something in Mary's talk where she talked about Leonardo insisting on the primacy of drawing. I think as the Chicago Ideas Festival, and as all our technology is trying to fire us like a bullet into the future, in a way I feel like poets have a kind of existential holding motion, a kind of anchor motion saying, no, we aren't going forward. It's not possible to go forward and leave some things behind. You still have to draw the body with a pencil. On the day I was born, says Cesar Vallejo, God was sick. This is a line of memorable poetry, but not because it's going to inspire the youth of America to try harder in school. It marks a position on the arc of the human spirit that many feet have had to touch, and many more will be unable to avoid. It's like second base. Vallejo, with his sentence, puts that base there, and it is there forever. On the day I was born, God was sick. something Barack Obama is not allowed to say no matter how he feels, something John Boehner has not considered yet. Like you, I have had this experience innumerable times of reading a line of a poem and feeling an idea or a feeling enunciated, which I've held inside me all my life, and which might never have been named if not for that speaker. When the artist gives us something that we recognize in this kind of long-awaited manner, I, in this case the poet, as we meet the poem and we recognize it, we receive it like a puzzle piece we have been looking for. And even though it might be a fragment, a shard of self, it fits us. And as a result, it makes our picture of ourselves or of the world more complete. So what is deformed fits into a whole. The deformity is integrated into a complete picture, and it really is a gift. Artists are valuable for the normality of their abnormality. Oddly enough, deformity and woundedness have to be honored and in some ways even protected. And here's an old claim. They themselves must resist being healed before the world is healed and fixed. The poet needs to resist conformity, middle-classness, absorption. That's why one of our most giant poet citizens, Robert Bly, in his many essays and in moderate public speech has said, the university is a dangerous place for the American poet, and writers' workshops, and the life of middle-class comfort. When the poet loses touch with his or her deformity, when the poet gets comfortable, she or he stops being the true canary. There's no greater danger to the poet than success and self-assuredness. After they win prizes, poets start writing about how to keep their Cabernet at the right temperature, or about taking their cat to get acupuncture on Park Avenue. If we are at war, why aren't we suffering? A writer friend of mine said to me a winter or two ago. So simple, so naive, that question. Just hanging there, waiting to be answered. If we are at war, why aren't we suffering? What empowers poetry is the need of the hunchback to talk about his hump, which is everybody's hump. Here's a poem by James Tate. It's called The Rules. Jack told me never to reveal my true identity. I would never do that, I said. Always wear a partial disguise, he said. Of course, I said. And try to blend in with the crowd, he said. Naturally, I said. And never fall in love, he said. Far too dangerous, I said. Never raise your voice, he said. Understood, I said. Never run, he said. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. Never make a glutton of yourself, he said. It won't happen, I said. Always be polite, he said. That's me, polite, he said. Never sing in public, he said. You have my promise, I said. Don't touch strangers, he said. That's for sure, I said. Never speed, he said. You can count on me, I said. No sushi, he said. Oh no, he said. No fandango, he said. Not possible, I said. No farm animals, he said. Not my style, I said. Beware of hypnotism, he said. Always alert, I said. Watch out for fortune tellers, he said. Never, I said. Avoid crusades, he said. Certainly, I said. Never ride a blimp, he said. Blimps are out, I said. Do not chase turkeys, he said. I will not, I said. Do not put your hand in the mouth of a horse, he said. Out of the question, he said. Never believe in miracles, he said. Of course, I said. The artist is the agent of articulate deformity, exaggerates but also accurately touches upon the unnamed thing that is killing you. Thing is, it can also be deformed articulation. That is the price of loose lips. The job of the poet is to be hysterical and to fight dirty, to go off half-cocked, and the conservatism with which we monitor poets, like Amiri Baraka a few years ago, is not really a good thing for our collective art. So it's the job of the poet to be reckless, and this is the problem with things like poet laureates, who almost inevitably get selected for their civility. And indeed, if they were uncivil, Congress would probably cancel the position. I'm really grateful that Philip Levine is the new poet laureate, and I'm really counting on him to say some really unpolitically correct things and to make a big stink. We have too many poet laureate senators and congressmen, diplomats. Careful speech is speech that has been censored before it ever hit the air. You can be too careful, and when we are too careful is when poetry is neutered. It's not the pretty people who know what we need to know, who have what Williams called the news. I'm going to finish by reading by reading two poems. One is a poem which is a Native American poem. I was told Osage, but who knows? Probably somebody, probably somebody in Cincinnati made it up. Song of Speaks Fluently. To have to carry your own corn far, who likes it? To follow the black bear into the thicket, who likes it? To hunt without profit, to return without anything, who likes it? You have to carry your own corn far. You have to follow the black bear into the thicket. You have to hunt without profit. If not, what will you tell the little ones? What will you speak of? For it is bad not to use the talk which God has sent us. I am speaks fluently. Of all the groups of symbols, I am a symbol by myself. This last poem I'm going to read is by Thomas Tranströmer, coincidentally, who just won the Nobel Prize. Good choice. And this is a poem I once had to talk to the Board of Regents at the University of Houston where I work. And I read them this poem. I said, no other department on this campus is teaching the students that it's good to fail. Of course, they didn't have an idea what I was talking about. It's called Romanesque Arches. Tourists have crowded into the half-dark of the enormous Romanesque church. Vault opening behind vault, and at no perspective. A few candle flames flickered. An angel whose face I couldn't see embraced me, and his whisper went all through my body. Don't be ashamed to be a human being. Be proud. Inside you, one vault after another opens endlessly. You'll never be complete, and that's as it should be.